The NFL draft is in the books, and we are ready to break down our top 24 tier list rankings for Superflex formats. For those of you guys that want all of our rankings, our draft guide, prospect model stuff, link down below in the pinned comment for flockfantasy.com. Tons of updates going on today, tomorrow, and the next day. But today, basically, we're going to break down how we would handle these guys in rookie drafts, focusing mainly on the fits, where they went, the draft capital, all the fantasy-related stuff. We have, of course, talked about these guys from an in-depth talent standpoint in other tier list videos before the draft. If you are a Jags fan, you want to know talent-wise what we think of Hunter, we'll drop that in the description so that you guys know you can go back to those videos. But this is going to be mainly focused on Dynasty rookie drafts. And also, too, with this week being a big content week, let us know what kind of content you guys want to see. We are here to serve you in your rookie drafts. Drop that down below. Do you want to see mock drafts? Do you want to see sleepers? Do you want to see, veteran trade targets? Like, what do you guys want to see? Drop that stuff down below. But Danny, let's not waste any time and let's get right into this, because this is a very, very interesting draft that we had.
100%. And like you said, summing up basically the fact that this is going to be directed at fit. This is going to be directed at draft capital at hand. If you want to hear minutes, hours of us glazing Travis Hunter, glazing Ashton Jeanty, we got the film breakdowns over on flockfantasy.com, and we have a lot of videos already on the channel talking about the caliber of prospects these guys are. Let's waste no more time, though. The guy that's going to go 101 and I would say over under 99% of drafts.
It should be 100%. To me, I know we're going to talk about Hunter in a second, but to me, I think Jeanty is unequivocally the 101 in this class, even more so than Bijan was in 2023. I think there was people making arguments for quarterbacks, making arguments for other things. To me, Genty's the 101. He goes to the Raiders, 6th overall. This was a very common landing spot. So we've talked about this fit quite a bit in terms of, mock drafts with landing spots types of videos. 6th overall draft capital is 6th overall draft capital. You are going to get a lot of carries. You're going to get a lot of touches. Raheem Mostert is the next best running back on that roster. He is going to carry every ounce of the touches there. Geno Smith is a good quarterback. The Raiders are building a nice little offense here with Brock Bowers, with Jacoby Myers, with Jack Besh, who they drafted in the second round, who we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. This is a good offense. Jeanty didn't have a whole lot of receiving upside in his final season at Boise State, but we knew he could do it as a sophomore. And I do think having a, older quarterback like Geno will also help him get more touches in the receiving game.
Yeah, 100%. With Ashton Jeanty, pretty simple. You're landing a spot that historically we've seen, like you said, with Pete Carroll wanting to run the football. The draft capital is up there with the Saquon Barkleys, the Bijan Robinsons, the worst running back that we've had go in the top 10 and how long has been Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette, a 3-time RB1 and multi-time, high-end, really relevant fantasy asset. And Jeanty is just a much better player. His best comp in the prospect model is Christian McCaffrey, legitimately. And I broke down the running backs to target and avoid yesterday. You can check that video out. All the running backs, I went in on depth in terms of their fit, in terms of their prospect profiles. 102 to 103 is the first conversation point, I would say, for a lot of people in their leagues. Danny and I both have Travis Hunter as the 102. And of course, the major question a lot of people, especially if you guys are more casual fantasy players, you might not know this yet. Travis Hunter was a two-way player in college, definitely worthy of being a two-way player in the NFL. But the brass of Jacksonville, James Gladstone, the GM, Liam Cohen, the head coach, basically have said he is going to learn offense first, and we'll use him as much as we can on defense. It's points clearly to me that they spent a early second round pick, the 5th overall pick, and a 26th first to go and trade up for what they presume to be a unicorn type of talent, a guy who can literally change the sport. That is a direct quote from the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Hunter, to me, do you guys want to pass on a player who can legitimately change the sport, and primarily most of that being on offense like they've already talked about?
And I think that is the critical context as well. You don't give up number 5, number 36, 2026 first if you're not planning on playing him at least predominantly at the more valuable position. Just look at the market. Jamar Chase, $40 million deal. You compare that to the highest paid corner, I believe, is at about $30 million per year. You don't make an aggressive move like this without the vision of him potentially playing primarily wide receiver, and then whatever snaps we can give him on defense will be, or whatever he's able to handle for that matter, we'll be able to give him. With Travis Hunter, the main difference between us, again, we both have him at 102. I personally do have him in the tier with Ashton Jeanty. I have him right now as a top 9 overall dynasty wide receiver, a guy I'd be comfortable taking in the top 20 of startups. And I do think if you need a wide receiver at 101, people might say, oh, it's outrageous to pass on Jeanty. I really do think Hunter has a claim for himself. number 2 overall draft capital. I could talk about the prospect himself, how I literally comped him to Odell Beckham Jr., half point behind Marvin Harrison historically in terms of my prospect grades at wide receiver. That'll take way too long to hash out. The point being, in terms of this landing spot, what we knew for the longest time is he would go second overall. It's just we thought it would potentially be to the Cleveland Browns. Unsettled quarterback situation. Again, we knew that they understood the talent at hand because they literally referenced him as Shohei Ohtani. The Jaguars knew what they're dealing with. They have Trevor Lawrence in hand. They have Liam Cohn. People might question about the overall volatility, I would say, of the situation because you have BTJ there. You have Hunter, who's going to end up emerging as the one. I think that's a fair conversation to have. My counter would be, I just think this is going to end up being the most consolidated target situation in the league.
Yeah, and I might be on an island here. I think Hunter's a better receiver than Brian Thomas Jr. As great as Brian Thomas Jr. is, I think Hunter's a better receiver than Brian Thomas Jr. and will be in short order.
I think he could be the best receiver in the league. Like, that is the level of talent we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and there's going to be people out there that possess the 102, 103, wherever Travis Hunter goes in your league, who also roster Brian Thomas Jr. on their team. Don't worry about it. Just draft them both, figure the rest out later. You want to trade Brian Thomas Jr. for, Puka Nacua straight up and, pivot off of that consolidation of the offense, like you said. If you had T. Higgins right now, would it stop you from drafting a rookie Jamar Chase? And the answer is absolutely it would not. So don't pass on Travis Hunter. And for those of you guys that are blessed, lucky enough to not have to pay the 102 for Travis Hunter, you can get him 105, 106, 107. People were commenting on yesterday's video saying he was getting, late first round capital in some people's rookie drafts. Take the generational wealth opportunity.
Dude, at that point, the opportunity cost is so low. Sure, you swing on the 107, 108 Hunter, and maybe he plays some defense. Yeah, maybe that bumps. But guess what? It is in the range of outcomes. He is the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty, and you just got him at the 107, 108 in rookie drafts. And if you ask, back in 2020, how those Justin Jefferson managers felt taking him in the mid to late portion of the first round, I think they're probably smiling with a wide open grin.
Yeah, and I would say he's going to go anywhere between 102 and 105 in most leagues. Again, anywhere other than 102, we would consider a value. If you feel like you can get him 104 and you want to trade down, feel free to do it. I would say don't get too cute and hope that he is not off the board. Omarion Hampton, I would say for most people, probably 75% of leagues, give or take, especially more casual leagues, will be the 102 for a lot of people. On Keep Trade Cut right now, for example, he is listed as the 102, and he's a decent amount in terms of overall value, listed higher than Travis Hunter. So that makes me think that the market almost views it as a bit of a tier break. We do not, obviously. We just made that perfectly clear. But Omarion Hampton, first round draft capital to a situation in Los Angeles that has a great offensive line, team very committed to the run, has a great quarterback who has a propensity to throw the ball to his running backs, which is something Hampton did well at the University of North Carolina. The only thing that you might have a concern with about Hampton is that Najee Harris is a capable veteran running back who will be a pest year one, who probably will start the season as the starting running back or at least be a 50-50 timeshare or something like that. By midway through Omarion Hampton's rookie season, end of Omarion Hampton's rookie season, even worst case scenario at the end, like going into year 2 for Omarion Hampton, you're going to be looking at a guy who's a legitimate RB1 in fantasy. He's a workhorse caliber prospect. I broke that down in yesterday's prospect model video. 83% of the time you get a top 15, top 12 season out of players like this. And Omarion Hampton is already a top 6 dynasty running back for me.
J.K. Dobbins averaged 14.8 PPR points per game last year, and that was including the fact that he wore down as the season went along. We saw the injuries pile up. We saw the efficiency go down. There's a reason why the Chargers this offseason let him go, went out and gave that incentive-laden deal to Najee Harris, and then now spent that first-round pick, 22nd overall draft capital on Omarion Hampton. It's apparent last year that they wanted to try to run the football. If you look at the splits in the first 6 weeks, the passing volume in those 6 weeks versus the passing volume in week 17 to 18, they inherently had to throw the football more in week 17 to 18 because they didn't have the same success running the football that they did early on in the season. You plug Omarion Hampton in, like you said, you have the hammer or the thunder and lightning aspect here, only Omarion Hampton actually represents both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about it when he was drafted, and I talked about it in yesterday's video as well. The Los Angeles Chargers were the number 1 gap running scheme in the NFL, and Omarion Hampton was significantly better in gap running schemes or plays in college than he was on zone running plays. He's the type of guy, blow a hole open for it. He's big, he's physical, he can run through arm tackles, he can take it to the house. Jonathan Taylor was a common comp for a lot of people. Nick Chubb, a common comp for a lot of people. Those type of running backs, give him holes and watch him go. And Hampton can catch the ball better than both of those guys. So watch out for how good this guy could be for fantasy.
Hey, we won't be complaining if we see Jim Harbaugh use him like he used Blake Corum in college when he had 28 rushing touchdowns in the season.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, if you wanted to take him 102, I personally would be okay with it. You not as much because you have Hunter and Jeanty in the same tier. I have Hunter and Hampton in the same tier because if you add a really, really good team, add a running back to this team and watch it go because you're, a running back away from winning your title, I'm okay doing it for Hampton. I'm okay doing it, but I wouldn't go any further than that over Travis Hunter. I would not take Tet over him, Henderson over him, none of those other guys over him. We'll get to those guys in a second.
Yeah, Hampton is very clearly my 103. It's not his fault that I wouldn't take him over Hunter in any circumstance. It's more so just Hunter is that special for me.
Yeah, which I don't think is an outrageous take at all. So moving into 104 to 106. For me, I don't actually have a mini tier between Tet McMillan and these guys, but in my mind, it almost feels like if you were looking at your dynasty teams, like if you're in 3 or 4 dynasty leagues and you saw 104 as the pick that you have versus 105, I would feel a lot happier about the 104. But then again, keep trade cut, and I think a lot of fantasy leagues out there are probably going to favor Treveyon Henderson over Tet McMillan, just because Tet McMillan had some haters before the draft, but he goes 8th overall ultimately, goes to a quarterback in Bryce Young who played a lot better and looked like a legitimate franchise quarterback back half of the season after he was benched. And Tet McMillan enters a receiver core. While, yes, they selected Xavier Legette in the first round, he was the second worst receiver to go in the first round, according to the prospect model, since 2016. Didn't really have a great rookie season. We think Xavier Legette's a fine player. We believe in him. He's just not an exceptional target earning, alpha or anything like that. Coker, undrafted free agent, fun player. But realistically, this is the number one here. Tet McMillan is going to be beloved by his quarterback.
100%. He is going to be the alpha wide receiver 1, and Coker and Legette are going to be fighting for number 2 looks in this offense. Let's not get it twisted. Again, we have Dave Canales in a division where he had to see Drake London. He had to see Chris Godwin. He understands. I mean, Mike Evans, actually, for that matter as well. I honestly think we could see a varied usage between what Evans was doing for Tampa Bay, what Chris Godwin was doing for Tampa Bay. And I think, honestly, Dave Canales views Tet McMillan as that bridge to both of those respective usages. If he needs to go in there, play that big slot role, you can get a Drake London level output from him. If he needs to go out there, play that X wide receiver position, it's understandable why people have thrown out Mike Evans, have thrown out T. Higgins as the call-up. Tet McMillan is a unicorn, and if you can get a guy with this level of upside in the mid portion of your first round, just count your blessings.
And you will be able to, because there's 2 narratives going against Tet McMillan. First of all, when I do the wide receivers to target and avoid video, which will be live later today, he's the 5th best wide receiver prospect since the year 2016. Very comparable to Rome Odunze and Drake London coming out. So if you have questions about his talent, you shouldn't. He was a top 8 pick for a reason. Exceptionally productive, big, physical, has athleticism. Don't be worried about that. Number 2, people do not think Bryce Young is very good. And I frankly just think Bryce Young is a lot better than most of the public, especially casual league mates of yours, probably think. And not to mention, Bryce Young is now surrounded with some actual talent. Going into year 1, we were all really worried about Carolina's situation. They had no good receivers, no good run game, no good offensive line pieces, bad coaching. They have all of those things now. Their offensive line was pretty good last year. They now have 3 receivers that are young, ascending players. Adam Thielen on the roster still to coach up those young receivers. Better coaching with Dave Canales, who, as I saw in Tampa Bay 2 years ago, and as we saw in Carolina last year, as the season went along, people start to buy into the system. People start to learn it. It's kind of a complex system. Get Bryce Young on the move. Get him thrown to a guy like Tet McMillan. Run Tet McMillan on deep crossers every single route. He is not going to lose. And for that matter, running Xavier Legette in the opposite direction, because both of those guys are going to be dominant on that type of route concept.
100%. And I honestly think it takes a lot of pressure off of Legette himself. You got a 6'4" wide receiver that can man a lot of those X looks. Again, this video isn't about Legette or about the Panthers for that matter. It's about Tetairoa McMillan. But the gravity he'll bring in terms of enabling this offense, playing that X wide receiver role, having the versatility to play inside, just opens up a lot more for what Dave Canales wants to call up.
Yeah, absolutely. So if, again, people are stupid enough to let this dude fall 105, 106, 107, 108, take the value, and take the value. Treveyon Henderson, 105 for both of us. Love the fit. Drake May is a great quarterback. We are obviously Drake May pilled on this channel. Absolutely. Drake May is going to throw the ball to Treveyon Henderson too, because we've seen him do it. We saw him do it with Omarion Hampton, his final year at University of North Carolina. Treveyon Henderson, however, will probably be in a committee year 1, which is kind of similar to what I said with Hampton. Ramondre Stevenson's a big back. He's a different skill set than what Treveyon Henderson is. He's going to be a thumper, potentially taking away goal line carries, early down work. We don't exactly know how that's going to factor in. However, TreVeyon Henderson was the 38th overall pick in the draft. This coaching staff did not draft Ramondre Stevenson, nor did the previous coaching staff. And the previous coaching staff also tried to give Antonio Gibson a full workload because they didn't want to give Ramondre Stevenson any work. So as much as I think Henderson might take a little bit to get going, might not be a huge, utter workhorse year one. He's a receiving back. He's been exceptionally productive at Ohio State whenever healthy. And they spent high draft capital on him. So yes, 105, that's as high as I would take him. I would not take him higher than that over these other four guys.
Yeah, and I think the biggest winner of the situation, like you say, Drake May needs another weapon in the passing game. We understand, again, we'll talk about Kyle Williams later on, 69th overall draft capital to supplement the wide receiver production. But we also look TreVeyon Henderson as a big-time fulcrum for this passing attack. And in fact, he lands in the most ideal situation based off historical usage from Josh McDaniels. Who did Josh McDaniels have in the Brady tenure in the mid-2010s? Oh, just an undersized back, 5'10", 205 pounds by the name of James White. James White couldn't even sniff TreVeyon Henderson in a 40-yard dash in a 100-meter race. We're talking about a different caliber of athlete with similar type of receiving upside. James White in his prime 2016 to 2019, 86 targets, 72 targets, 123 targets, and 95 targets in 15 games. It's easy to visualize how TreVeyon Henderson is going to be used, because if you're giving and you're supplementing him similar receiving production to what we saw from James White with a more natural runner between the tackles, it's hard not to vision Devon Achane, maybe even Jahmyr Gibbs light level upside.
Not to mention, Josh Jacobs' career-high receiving yards came with Josh McDaniels as the head coach and play caller. Josh Jacobs not a very, he's a good receiver, but he's not an excellent receiver. So even a guy like Jacobs being the workhorse in Las Vegas there, they used him out of the backfield as a great receiving back in 2022, obviously his best career season there. So I feel really good about getting TreVeyon Henderson. Cam Ward is the last guy of this tier. Go ahead.
One more point on Henderson. You've mentioned actually in 2018, right? James White had how many PPR points per game? 17 plus? 17 PPR points per game. He reached 17 PPR points per game in a year he had less than 100 rushing attempts. Even if TreVeyon Henderson doesn't get the bulk of the carries year one, maybe he is a 10 to 12 carry per game, 5 to 6 target per game level player. He has the opportunity to break fantasy football.
He does, yeah. The one worry I would have would be touchdown upside, just because Stevenson's a big back. It's kind of a bad offense, still young ascending offense. Hopefully they can figure some things out in year one with Vrabel and with Josh McDaniels. But regardless, Henderson going to be a really solid pick for year 2, year 3, year 4, and beyond. Cam Ward, the first overall pick in the draft to the Tennessee Titans. This is super flex. So some people might be thinking, oh, this is too low for Cam Ward. I personally don't value Cam Ward on the level of some of like last year's quarterback prospects. You guys might be looking, okay, oh, well, look what Bo Nix did his rookie season. Look what Jaden Daniels did his rookie season. To me, Cam Ward is just a subpar prospect relative to those guys. Him and Bo Nix definitely close. Cam Ward, first overall draft capital is excellent. I think the Tennessee Titans have functional offensive weapons. I think, Ridley, they picked up Io Manor in the 4th round. They actually picked up his former teammate Xavier Restrepo as an undrafted free agent as well. And they also have a young, somewhat ascending offensive line, a good duo of running backs in Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard. We'll see how good of a coach Brian Callahan ends up being. It's a decent situation. I'm not going to lie to you. It is a pretty decent situation. Yep. He's a risky prospect. That's my point on him.
Yeah, my counter to that would be, yes, sure, he is a volatile prospect. However, he did go first overall in the class. You just mentioned that. I think this is a relatively decent landing spot comparative to other potential first overall situations. And we have seen the implied upside of a rookie quarterback. If he does go out there and has a productive rookie season, we're talking about at worst a top 15, potentially even top 12 level startup pick. I understand that there is risk here. He is not a finished product by any means, but once you're at the 105, 106 in your rookie drafts and you get a quarterback that has the upside to be a potential first round startup pick, high second round startup pick, I think this is where the risk is worth the reward.
I don't disagree with you. This is a mistake that I've made in the past where I'm just going to elevate the quarterback because he's a quarterback and because he has upside. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. Yeah. We've seen quarterbacks, even top five capital are a coin flip proposition at best. And you're right. Great, pretty good landing spot for him. However, I thought some of those guys were even better prospects than Cam Ward. And they didn't really work out. Despite Jets were a decent landing spot for Zach Wilson. Didn't have line, but he did have receivers. Trey Lance, of course, couldn't stay on the field. I don't love taking Cam Ward, who is an inferior quarterback prospect, over Henderson, McMillan, those type of guys who are better at their own respective positions, even if the upside is slightly higher.
Can I counter that using those exact examples for you?
Yeah.
After his rookie season, Zach Wilson was going where in startups?
3rd, 4th round.
And that was after having an objectively terrible rookie season. Same thing with Trey Lance. He was going in the mid-second round of startups despite starting 0 games as a rookie, 3 games as a second-year player. Like, there is going to be a point where if you are unsold about Cam Ward, maybe he struggles out of the gate, you're still getting value retention because he's probably still going to be a 3rd, 4th round startup pick. And at that point, if you want to get out because you're scared of the risk level, I think that's reasonable. It's just doing it before we even see a sample size in the NFL. When you're going to have a later selling window, I would rather just be able to hold that.
That's totally fine. I just think it's a coin flip. He has one of those types of rookie seasons. I just don't envision Henderson, McMillan, those type of guys having a rookie season like that. They could, obviously, anything's possible. But my thought process is the range of outcomes a little tighter with those other guys, even if the upside is very, very strong. And the value insulation, as you point to, is pretty strong with quarterbacks in general, especially first overall pick quarterbacks. So moving in to the next tier of players, big clusterfuck here. We got Emeka Egbuka, Quinshon Judkins, Matthew Golden, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren. All the team logos, by the way, are on the screen. Just to repeat, Egbuka goes 19th overall to the Bucks. Quinshon Judkins, 36th overall to the Browns. Matthew Golden, 23rd overall to the Packers. And then Colston Loveland, 10th overall to the Bears. Tyler Warren, 14th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. Emeka Egbuka, we talked about pretty much in depth in the last video to after the first round. So I'm not going to go super rehash on everything. My thought process is this: 32-year-old wide receiver 1 in Mike Evans, 29.5-year-old Chris Godwin coming off of a major ankle injury. Emeka Egbuka year 1 objectively screams Rome Odunze rookie season, Jackson Smith and Jigba rookie season, maybe at best case scenario, CeeDee Lamb rookie season, where they had Gallup, they had Cooper, that kind of situation. My thought process on Emeka Egbuka is this: he's a wide receiver 1 upside prospect, very clearly the wide receiver 3 in this class for me, wide receiver 4 for Danny. Very talented prospect, goes top 20, great draft capital in an aging wide receiver core. He can play all over the formation. There's a lot of narratives that he only plays in the slot. I don't personally agree with those narratives. And this is a quarterback in an offense that threw the ball like crazy. 4,500 passing yards, 41 passing touchdowns. They had a 5 to 7 game stretch last year where Mike Evans was hurt, Chris Godwin was hurt, and Ryan Miller and a bunch of random slappies were catching passes. Kate Otten was the number 1 target, and Baker was still playing well. So I can see a pretty solid 800-yard rookie season out of Emeka Egbuka, good underlying metrics, retains his value. And of course, year 2, year 3 is when he can become potentially the number 1, the number 2 of this offense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm trying to find it right now to fact check. How many points per game then did Jalen McMillan average in like the last 6 weeks of the season?
I believe he had 7 touchdowns over the final 8 games. So, I mean,
I'm seeing it right now.
He was productive, and he's going to be on the bench now, like realistically. Like Egbuka is going to play over him early.
Yeah, so if you take specifically weeks 14, 18, again, very small sample size. I'm not just saying, yeah, you plug and play that for Egbuka. But this is an offense that we know will want to throw the football based off the tendencies we saw last year, based off the overall construct of the offense. And Jalen McMillan down the stretch last year, like you said, touchdown luck, sure. 19.8 PPR points per game, weeks 14 to 18. So we see the upside. If Godwin or Evans were to miss time, maybe they wore down by week 13, 14. Now you're plugging in Emeka Egbuka in there. Guess what? Emeka Egbuka is Jalen McMillan on steroids.
Yeah, essentially. Don't actually drug test him. He's not on steroids, NFL. But some people might be concerned. Liam Cohen left. Maybe that's the offense is going to be affected. Josh Grizzard, interim or was the offensive pass game coordinator last year, called third down passing plays, and we were number 1 in the NFL in third down conversion rate. So it's essentially the same offense, different architect, same thing. To me, I feel pretty good about the offense at least being still a top 5 to 10 unit. Like, we were literally one of the best offenses in the league last year, and we only added depth at wide receiver, depth on the offensive line, depth everywhere, pretty much. Like, this is a really, really good situation for Emeka Egbuka to walk into. Even you got to squint year 1, but the NFL, it stands for not for long for a reason. I do want to point out that it sounds like Mike Evans might be hanging it up after this year too.
Really? Is that what the reports are saying out of Tampa after the draft?
So the reports aren't saying it, but Mike Evans went on one of my favorite podcasts and essentially hinted at it. And also, I don't think Jason Light makes this selection without knowing when Mike Evans is going to hang things up, personally.
Yeah, especially because every time they ask him about Jalen McMillan, it's a glowing review. Obviously, Godwin comes back on the 3-year deal. So, I mean, the tea leaves are pointing to that. And in fact, if people are going to let Emeka Egbuka fall because of the 1 year maybe even first half of year immediate return. Like I said, if any of those veteran wide receivers were to go down, if that Cade Otton were to miss any time, you're talking about a
Godwin's
guy
coming
that,
off of a major injury. He might not be ready week 1 too.
yeah. Regardless, he is both of our 107s. The talent profile mixed with a very, very friendly situation for fantasy conducive success. We love that. We can move on to our consensus 108. I believe we both have him 108. Let me check. Yeah, he's my 108. He is your 108 as well. We'll start off with why you love Quinshon Judkins and why the fit for the Cleveland Browns is a match made in heaven. The only issue, as we'll talk about in a second, is we're not done at running back in this draft.
Yeah, I've talked about why I think Quinshon Judkins was a very over-scrutinized prospect. The reality is this was a freshman running back who rushed for 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, broke tackles, made people miss, excellent athlete, gets top 36 overall draft capital, which is precisely the same exact pick of the guy he's replacing in Nick Chubb. So you get a guy who's going to be an early down grinder for this team. Yeah, it's Joe Flacco, Shadur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, and Kenny Pickett playing quarterback at this moment in time. But this is a good offensive line, a good rushing scheme. They have Judy, they have Njoku, they added Fannin in the draft. Maybe they're not done at wide receiver. They still have a decent, capable, functional top 20-ish offense, and Judkins can carry a huge workload, in my opinion. I know that Sampson, who we'll talk about later, is going to factor in as probably a change of pace back, especially right away. But top 36 capital for a running back who was once considered, the Devi 101 and has been a staple prospect for a lot of people for a long time behind a good line. I feel very confident taking him at 108 where I have him ranked. But I do think this is, of all the guys we've talked about so far, this is going to be the guy that gets the overthinking treatment the most out of anybody that we've talked about. There's going to be people who let him fall to 201, 202. There's going to be people who let him fall to 112, 111, take the tight ends over him, take Golden over him, maybe even take RJ Harvey or Taylor Johnson over him.
In the majority of drafts, do you think people will be taking 60th overall RJ Harvey to the Broncos or 36th overall Quinshon Judkins to the Browns? Because I've already seen the sentiment on Twitter of people implying that. What percentage of the market do you think will actually have Harvey above him?
30%. I think at least the casual leagues for sure. Like they're going to look Broncos, no running backs there. Give me the volume. And that's a valid take in my opinion, if they were the same caliber prospect, which they are not. And Judkins was drafted a round ahead.
Well, let me ask you another thing. Where do you think their ADP is going to lie? Do you think in a PPR league, Harvey or Quinshon Judkins is going to go higher?
I think that Judkins ADP should end up being higher ultimately because I think the smarter dynasty players will get it that way. I guess he didn't go a round ahead of RJ Harvey. He went like 30 picks ahead of him though, even though it was in the same round. So to me, I think this is really good value that you're going to get on I was willing to take Judkins ahead of Henderson before they drafted Sampson going into day 3 of the draft. I thought Judkins was going to be, slightly the better year 1 projection, especially because I think he can get on the field right away, carry a big workload, 250 plus carries his rookie season. I really do see that within the range of outcomes. So I'm not overthinking Judkins. He's going to be on a lot of my teams.
The worst case scenario, this is a Montgomery Gibbs situation, and that would be expecting way more out of Sampson than I think the implied draft capital will be. We'll talk about Sampson a bit, and that'd be even underplaying the 3-down capability of Judkins. Even if you get a slightly better Montgomery and a worse Gibbs in that situation, I think we can kind of see it mirror what we have in Detroit, except when you're comparing 36th overall draft capital to, we'll talk about in a little bit, 126th overall, there's a big discrepancy. There's a reason why we both have him at 108, and we'll talk about where we have Sampson later on.
Yeah, and there's at least some upside in this quarterback core. Joe Flacco can still play. Shadur Sanders definitely should not have been a 5th-round pick. He should at least have been a 2nd-round pick. So we're talking, there's some upside here. It's not totally hopeless at quarterback.
Yep. No, I agree there. We can move on, though, to the next player, our consensus 109. I have him as my 111 in this class. We'll talk about the tight ends in a second as to why I prefer them. You have him, I believe, 109, correct?
Yeah, I have him exactly at 109. Golden going 23rd overall to the Packers. Definitely, we talked about it after the first round. Great fit because they don't have a receiver of this archetype, a downfield true 3-level separator like Matthew Golden. Again, there in the dynasty community specifically, a lot of people had problems with his profile, wasn't overly productive. The bottom line is when Texas needed him in the money games, he was the guy for them. And It was very overwhelmingly that he was the guy for them. So Golden going to the Packers, where Jaden Reed's just a slot receiver. He's definitely a fun, has big upside on any given week kind of receiver. Wicks, Dobbs, Watson, these guys are functional starting NFL receivers, but they're not going to prohibit you if you're Matthew Golden and you're the type of talent that you showed on film specifically at the end of that Texas season from being the future number 1 here. And again, it's hard to project a guy who, really was never truly a number one for a full sustained college football season, but he was banged up at Houston his sophomore year, had a good freshman season, and by the time it counted at Texas, was the number one there. So I feel pretty good that he can win out this number one job. I'm not going to take him at 103 or something because I think he's absolutely going to be the number one here, but it wouldn't shock me if a year from now we're redrafting this class and Matthew Golden goes off the board 104, 105 because he just had a great rookie season and he was the number one receiver for a really good young quarterback in Jordan Love.
Yeah, and again, not to make it such a micro player analysis, because again, we've talked about these guys ad nauseum. We've talked about their film. We've talked about their prospect profiles. We've outlined the whole shebang there. However, I will make the reference to the fact that my comp form was literally a Stephon Diggs light, and your comp form was literally Jordan Addison, who basically replaced Stephon Diggs in that aspect. Obviously, Justin Jefferson technically with the pick value, but in terms of the vertical wide receiver out of the slot, we saw Jordan Addison take on that role. This is the exact element this Green Bay Packers offense needed, because we've seen Jaden Reed be kind of your yak threat, be kind of your big play hunter, but we haven't had a sustained 3-level separator in Green Bay. Sorry, not New York. In Green Bay since Devontae Adams left. You add him to this offense. Jordan Love, obviously the play action shots we're going to be seeing in the context of this Green Bay scheme. And Matthew Golden is a ball winner down the field. He's feisty at the catch point, and he creates natural separation. In terms of just pure prospect to team fit, I think this is one of the best in the class.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree at all. Let's talk about the tight ends because Colson Loveland, 10th overall pick to the Bears, Tyler Warren, 14th overall pick to the Colts. Both of these guys, for everybody on planet Earth, were first-round talents, right? NFL drafts really loved them. Fantasy community's been pretty much in agreement that they've, project to be back-end first-round guys. I think maybe some people might be wondering why they're this low, potentially not ahead of Igbuka,
Heavy
not
premium,
ahead of Judkins, not ahead of Golden.
Like if you're in like a heavy premium, a 0.75, a full point premium, maybe you argue them a little higher. If you're in like a 0.5 or a non-tight end premium, this is personally where I kind of see these guys. Again, them and Golden is a very close discussion for me. I have Emeka Egbuka and Quinshon Judkins as clearly my 107 and 108 at this point. But if somebody wanted to say, yeah, I wanted those tight ends at 107 and 108, I wouldn't fault them for it, because top 10, top 14 overall capital. We'll talk about the team fits in a second. You couldn't have asked for much better when it comes to where these tight ends could have went.
Well, and that's why they're in this tier, right? Because in full premiums, you could argue them as high as 107, which is exactly what we're kind of saying here. I do have Tyler Warren ahead of Colson Loveland, so I'm going to make the argument, I guess, for him, and then you can make the argument for Loveland. Warren, when you squint, the fit is actually really good. When you don't squint, it looks bad because they have Downs, they have Pittman, they have Mitchell, they have Pierce, a lot of talented receivers there. They have Anthony Richardson, who frankly is horrible at playing quarterback, especially throwing the football, and Daniel Jones, who's not a whole lot much better in terms of that position. But Tyler Warren is a versatile chess piece. They're going to find ways to get him the football in his hand. He's the 14th overall pick in the draft. They are going to use him. He's went one pick after where Brock Bowers went in the draft last year. And to me, Tyler Warren has the most middle field upside in this offense. As much as I love Josh Downs, he's more of a vertical slot. So I think that Tyler Warren can be a big part of this offense. And I think whether it's Richardson, whether it's Daniel Jones, whether it's a quarterback in 2 years from now that is actually the guy that is his long-term quarterback answer, he's going to help whoever he plays with. He's a big physical guy. You throw it up to him in the red zone. I just feel pretty confident that he's going to be the type of tight end that can hold his value to some degree because the NFL draft and fantasy community loves him. And that's why he's probably already a top 6 to 7 dynasty tight end on the market. There's not many more tight ends you would take over both of these guys, but Warren, in this case, as I'm making the case for him.
Yeah, again, the immediate outlook I would agree with. The reason why I do have Loveland higher is Loveland, the younger prospect. Loveland in the long term, I would say, is the better situation, working with Caleb Williams, working with Ben Johnson. Yes, I understand year one. Trying to project him again. We'll talk about his teammate in a second with Luther Burden. We'll talk about the other two wide receivers on the roster with DJ Moore and with Roma Dunze. For the most part, you look at the Chicago Bears context of 2025 specifically, it's a very crowded situation. However, we've already heard reports. We've already heard the interview from Ben Johnson after the draft that he needs to kick up another fire into DJ Moore. He needs to kick up another fire into Cole Kmet. And they draft in their first 2 picks, quite literally, a tight end and a wide receiver. I'll talk about the 5th for Luther Burden specifically in a second. For Loveland, imagine him as the Sam Laporta in Ben Johnson's vision long term. a guy that's good in the yak game, a guy that can impact that middle of the field, really, really good in seam balls. I mean, we talked about in his film session, his ability to alter his catch point on defender leverage is something that I bet Ben Johnson looked at and said we need in our tight end core. Again, year one, the projection is a little murky. Maybe it's a Trey McBride situation because Cole Kmet's getting immediate opportunity. But I don't think Cole Kmet's going to be a Chicago Bear come 2026. I also think there's a possibility that DJ Moore gets moved. If that's the case, we're tethered to Caleb Williams again. I mean, we could rehash everything on the live stream. Yes, he is my quarterback 5 in Dynasty. But it's mostly, I trust Ben Johnson, I trust Caleb Williams, and I trust the talent level that I saw from Colston Loveland. On top of that, you're getting 10th overall insulation.
Of course, yeah. Trey McBride's situation does scare me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Because as great as Trey McBride is now, was anybody beating the door down post year one for Trey McBride in Dynasty? Like you lost some Dynasty value on that selection.
My counter, if Trey McBride went 10th overall, I think he would have retained a good amount more value.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Warren versus Loveland's going to be a conversation for a lot of people. My thought process is this. Dynasty players are reactive. They were a toss-up coming into this situation for a lot of people.
Yep.
The Colts have absolutely no tight ends worth of shit on the roster. And the Bears, not only do they have better receivers on the roster, they also have another tight end that could force Colston Loveland to play 40, 50, 60% of the snaps until week 10 of his rookie season or something like that. I'm not saying that's a likely scenario because you don't spend a 10th overall pick on a tight end and not use him. But Cole Kmet is good enough that he could be a pest for Colston Loveland. And Tyler Warren will have that tight end core to himself week 1 of his first season.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I mean, don't look further than Washington this year. They spent a 2nd overall pick on Ben Sinnott, and guess what? Zach Ertz was a tight end 8 overall in fantasy this year.
Yeah, and that was a high 2nd round pick, and he was the tight end 2 in the class for us, and he basically was a non-factor the entire year. And not to mention too, from a talent perspective, yes, Colston Loveland probably the higher ceiling, but he also is 2.5 years younger and more raw, and might take more time to develop versus Warren, I think, was a little bit more pro-ready coming out.
Yep. Again, it ultimately comes down to what type of flavor you have. If you need the immediate production at tight end, like you said, Tyler Warren's probably going to rank higher in redraft specifically. I do still prefer the long-term insulation of that situation with Chicago. I believe in Ben Johnson, believe in Caleb Williams the way I do.
Yeah, rebuilds, take Loveland. Win now, teams that need a tight end, take Tyler Warren. I think that's a pretty easy way of going about it. Moving into the next tier of players, 112 to 204-ish, so kind of 1-2 turn picks for us. Caleb Johnson, Steelers running back, was a 3rd round pick, 83rd overall. Jackson Dart, they trade back into the 1st round to take him. Maybe you guys could argue he's too low right now because he was a 1st round quarterback. RJ Harvey, 60th overall pick to the Denver Broncos, 2nd round pick. Luther Burden, high 2nd round pick to the Chicago Bears, who we just talked about his teammate Colston Loveland. And then Jaden Higgins, very high 2nd round pick to the Houston Texans there as well. So let's try and go a little bit faster on these guys if we can. Yep. Caleb Johnson, I talked about pretty in depth on the running backs to target and avoid. Excellent landing spot for him. Excellent landing spot for him. The 2nd highest zone rushing scheme in the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Arthur Smith. Caleb Johnson, top 5 running back in this class, EPA, missed tackles forced. He was much better in zone than he was in power gap schemes. So you get a guy who is a great scheme fit, who's probably going to have Aaron Rodgers play quarterback, I would imagine. They drafted Will Howard in the 6th round. I doubt that's going to be a huge factor. It's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback, if I had to guess. Young, ascending offensive line, good franchise, stable coaching staff, all that kind of stuff. I feel pretty good that Caleb Johnson is going to outperform his ADP. I have him ranked even a little bit higher than this. We have him ranked 112 consensus. I do actually have him over Loveland because I think year 1, he could be a pretty big time, production piece and gain a lot of value. And here's the other thing too. I said it in the running backs to target and avoid video yesterday. I expected him to go in the 3rd round, and he did. And he went to a spot with touches available. Jalen Warren, as fun as he is, he allowed Najee Harris to have 300 touches last year. And that's 300 touches up for grabs.
Well, that's what I was going to point out, right? So last year we see Najee Harris leaves 299 touches. Even if we assume, let's just say Jalen Warren, because it's a rookie versus, the established Najee Harris, let's say he absorbs 20% of that volume. We're still looking at about a 250, 260 touch workload for Caleb Johnson in year 1. And that is even being pessimistic. That's assuming Jalen Warren's going to take that work. Who's to say that Caleb Johnson doesn't go in from day 1 the exact archetype of running back that Arthur Smith has thrived with? I mean, we saw, for example, Algier. I think he's better than Algier, and Algier had 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie, averaged over 5 yards per pop. Obviously, the Derrick Henry comps. I don't think Caleb Johnson is quite Derrick Henry. Don't get me wrong, but 6'1", 225 pounder. We saw Derrick Henry 6'3", 245 pounder. So he is used to having a big running back handle a big touch workload. Caleb Johnson, it's funny because obviously he doesn't really have to change his colors from college, going from that Iowa black and yellow to the Pittsburgh Steelers black and yellow. He is the type of running back that if you are a Steelers fan, get ready for. He is going to set the tone. It's funny because my comp for him was quite literally James Conner, who was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 3rd round.
Yeah, he looks like a Steeler, man. Like, if I told you right now he had 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, 36 receptions next year, would you say that's a pretty decent rookie season out of him? That's exactly what Najee Harris did.
Absolutely. And Najee Harris was going in the 1st round of redraft leagues the following year. Now, obviously, that is a big projection. If we could say with certainty that Caleb Johnson would be a 1st round redraft pick by this time next year, you could even make the case for him being much higher. I think baking in some of the risk level, 83rd overall versus, again, I did expect him to go a little bit higher. I thought he could have snuck into the 2nd round, which is why he's 112 versus, I believe, 110, 111 is where I have him in the pre-draft process. But regardless, for any 3rd round spot other than maybe the Dallas Cowboys, could you picture a better spot than the Pittsburgh Steelers for him?
No, and to be clear, that was Najee Harris's production last year. He had 74 receptions his rookie season. So his rookie year was a lot better than that. But yeah, regardless, dude, Caleb Johnson goes to the perfect landing spot for him, the perfect situation for him. And I do think Aaron Rodgers will sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers at some point. Yeah. So if you're worried, okay, who's playing quarterback? It's Mason Rudolph. It's Will Howard right now. I highly expect it to be Aaron Rodgers at a certain point, which would probably boost him up a pick or two in ADP and rookie drafts if it's not announced by the time you guys are actually drafting who the quarterback is going to be. I do expect it to be Rodgers. So Caleb Johnson, very good option. Jackson Dart goes in the 1st round, which a little bit shocking, I would say, for some people. Jackson Dart is a capable quarterback prospect, but he is a late 1st round pick and he does need time to develop. So with Russell Wilson there, with Jameis Winston there, and a coach and a GM that are on the hot seat, I would say there's 2 ways to look at Jackson Dart. You can look at him, yes, he's a 1st round quarterback, and if he plays and he looks good, he'll gain a shit ton of value, because that same can be said for him as we said for Ward minus the 1st overall draft capital versus 25th overall draft capital. But the other side of the coin is he's a quarterback, micro player take wise that needs to develop because he is raw and he does not handle pressure very well. And he's going to one of the worst offensive lines in the league with a coaching staff and a GM who may not have the time to sit and let him develop. He should realistically probably sit his entire year, his rookie year.
I agree. And a prime example of it, I'm not sure if you saw what was kind of going viral on Twitter. It was basically Dart working with John Gruden. And John Gruden basically asked him, okay, what was the snap count that you had in college? And he's just like, simple as this.
He claps. That's it.
He claps. And then Gruden's like, okay, what about when you have to do a dummy count? He's like, we call that purple. And it's like John Gruden couldn't believe it because he's like, okay, this is an old school offensive coach used to the dictionary as his offensive play calls, hearing that now these modern quarterbacks are just clapping. Like it is pretty hilarious when you're contextualizing the learning curve from that Ole Miss offense into the NFL. However, when you're breaking it down, the meat and potatoes of it, he went 25th overall to an offensive mind that we believe in with Brian Dable, tethered to Malik Neighbors. I don't think you can lower him to the mid-second because you have to respect the capital at that point. But the reason why he is a little bit lower for me comparatively, he's at 15 for me. I believe he's 12 or 13 for you?
13, yeah.
It's just the learning curve, and I think I can get more immediate production specifically out of the running backs. Not to mention, I do believe in the upside of the next guy we'll talk about in a little bit with RJ Harvey and Luther Burden.
Yeah, and I think that's totally a fair assessment. Again, Jackson Dart's got a long way to go. But if you had a Michael Penix-like career out of year one, that would be probably likely. Yeah. Like you get Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston playing 13, 14 games next year. You get Jackson Dart in there for 3 or 4 games. He looks good. Maybe he gains some value after his rookie season. That would be what you were hoping for if you draft a guy like Jackson Dart. But if you're drafting him thinking he's going to start week 1, if he starts week 1, he must have looked a lot better in training camp than I thought he was going to. I just don't think he's going to be ready to start right away. And I think it's probably likely that they don't put him out there till at least like week 6 to 8.
Also, 2 little tidbits of information that I found hilarious that when Dart actually got traded up for went 25th. First one, of course, everybody kind of knows at this point, Carson Shane, the son of Joe Shane, actually posted a picture of, I believe, Jackson Dart on his Twitter, and they were actually following each other going into, I think, Wednesday night. So tea leaves are already there. On top of that as well, I believe Joe Shane's daughter actually goes to Ole Miss. So I'm sure they've been familiar with Jackson for quite a while now.
Yeah, it makes sense. Hopefully that wasn't a Nepo pick. Otherwise, it might end poorly for them. But RJ Harvey is going to be probably one of the bigger conversation points, I would say,
Yes.
of rookie drafts because, we've seen this before. Like we've seen, I wouldn't call him a subpar running back prospect because I think that's a little bit strong. I think he's a good player. I think he had redeeming qualities. He's elusive, good contact balance, great athlete, all that kind of stuff. Decent receiver. But this is a little CEH-y in terms of obviously not 101. You don't have to spend that pick on him, but he is going to go in casual leagues 109, 110, 111, and we're just not going to take him that high.
Where would you value soon to be 25-year-old James Cook? Is the question for RJ Harvey, because both of our comps were James Cook. James Cook was 22 years old coming out, similar draft capital, kind of went in that early-ish portion of the second round for the most part in a lot of our rookie drafts. What would you be willing to spend on? I mean, Buffalo Bills versus Denver Broncos, how you would call that basically a comparable situation?
I mean, Bills is a little bit better, and I also know that James Cook is a good running back and had a monster year last year.
Just
So I would
solely
actually
his profile, just solely his profile.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very similar situation. Like you had to take James Cook. There was people who took James Cook in the late first round, and I wasn't willing to do it. I was more early second round on James Cook, which is exactly how I feel about RJ Harvey. So it is a very comparable situation prospect wise to what James Cook had coming out.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to contextualize. I think the reason why we would have Harvey in this range as opposed to the first round is that we do believe he's basically just a worse bet on what James Cook was coming out. Because like I said, similar prospect profiles, you're getting a soon-to-be 25-year-old versus what was a soon-to-be 22 or 23-year-old when Cook came out. But obviously, again, the Cook pick, you can make the case completely smashed because now he's a top 15 overall dynasty running back. He's had a couple years of RB1 production. If you get that out of RJ Harvey, I'm sure you're going to be very, very ecstatic about your 201 or 202 investment.
Yeah, it's more just that he's an inferior prospect to the guys in the tier ahead of him. And I personally prefer Caleb Johnson still. I don't think there's a massive difference between late second round and mid third round capital. Like there isn't hit rate wise historically. If you're outside the top 50 overall picks as a running back, you might as well be an early third rounder. Like it's not really a huge difference to go 60th overall versus 83rd overall. Realistically, it's not that big of a difference. So I like Caleb Johnson. He was the better prospect by a pretty decent margin to me. And he went to maybe not quite as good of a landing spot, but there's a lot of touches under available for Caleb Johnson versus RJ Harvey.
The other thing too, I mean, they've really started to invest in their offensive line these last couple of years, and Arthur Smith is one of the best architects of a ground game. We already talked about the Caleb Johnson section, but I just want to add a little more context here because I also think people are going to point out to the fact that Denver was the most ideal situation of any running back in this draft for that matter, just in terms of maybe up there with the Dallas Cowboys, but you could have made the case given Sean Payton's sentiment, needing a joker, needing a lead ball carrier, that was actually the number one landing spot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And RJ Harvey goes to the Broncos. They have Estime as their best running back on the backfield right now. Like he's going to get touches, and Estime, maybe because he's bigger, will work in. He's also 2.5 years younger than Harvey. He's still getting better. We'll see what happens there. I'm not going to go ahead and say that RJ Harvey is going to get beaten out by Audric Estime. He's not going to. He's going to get more touches, but would it shock me if it's a closer split than people think it's going to be? Because a lot of people will just automatically give him 300 touches, no questions asked. It could be. It's possible. It's within the range of outcomes.
Like, let's say Estime gets 10 of the dirty touches and maybe a couple goal line carries a game.
Yeah, which is very possible given the size profile that he has. Obviously, Harvey has a lot more juice than him. I'm not going to call it Ingram and Kamara because this is like this is a Temu Ingram and Kamara versus, the actual brand name product. But Sean Payton has used two running backs in tandem before, one thumper who's slow and one fast, explosive receiving back. It's very possible he could use them in a similar way. Luther Burden is the next player that we're going to talk about. We already kind of talked in depth about the Bears situation, so we don't really need to rehash. We love Ben Johnson. We love Caleb Williams. It's a crowded receiver core there. Burden comes in. The comp that most of us had for Burden was the guy that he's playing with now in DJ Moore. And you also have Rome Odunze, going to be an outside receiver there, Colson Loveland, who they took 10th overall. I think if you squint, you can see by year two this looking really good for Luther Burden, right? They could trade DJ Moore. They could jettison Cole Kmet. We don't exactly know what's going to happen in this situation. What we do know is that if Burden is used properly and he just got in the hands of one of the best offensive coordinators in the league, he can be a really good player. It's just that he's a little bit raw and it's really crowded there.
Yeah, and that's the exciting thing. Ben Johnson went out and made sure he grabbed Luther Burden at 39, despite having DJ Moore, despite having Rome Odunze, despite taking a tight end in the first round. I don't think his vision is, this is going to be my permanent wide receiver 3, fourth option in the passing game long term. I think whether that means DJ Moore's on the way out, Cole Kmet's on the way out. Something's going to shake in the future for this Bears receiving room. Like you said, year one, probably not going to be the most productive year for Luther Burden. I think we're already kind of baking that in. But when you have Ben Johnson, the most creative offensive play caller, in my opinion, in the NFL, saying on Luther Burden, he's a playmaker waiting to happen. I see big things in his future. I just got to trust him on that. I saw a player with Luther Burden that I thought, if developed correctly, could be one of the 10 or so best wide receivers in the NFL. And he lands into the guy I trust most to be able to develop him.
Yeah, the Bears are really shaping up to be this year's Texans, where, you know, they add so many weapons. It's like, how much help does Stroud need? How much help does Kaleb need? Like, realistically, this is a really, really talented wide receiver core. It's also a very improved offensive line. And even though they didn't add a significant running back in the NFL draft, I think Swift and Roschon is very much capable enough. Maybe they'll add a Dobbins or something in free agency who's still available at some point. Like, this is a good offense, man. Like, you want pieces of this offense, and the NFL, I say this all the time, NFL, not for long. Who knows what's going to happen a year from now? Same thing you can say about Igbuka as well, which is like, what happens a year from now if Igbuka is the number 2 on this offense? What happens if a year from now Luther Burden's the number 2 on this offense? Also, at wide receiver, whoever gets open, whoever commands targets, just commands targets. There's no law saying that DJ Moore has to be the 1. Odunze has to be the 2. Loveland has to be the 3. It's just whoever goes out there and wins on their routes. And if Burden is developed correctly, like you said, he might just be the guy that goes out there and wins on his routes.
Yeah, I mean, there a report from the presser too. Ben Johnson was asked about Luther Burden, and the first thing he just said is stud. So that's another tidbit. On top of that too, it's not like they have a CeeDee Lamb, a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase. There's no like clear alpha on this team. If you squint, you told me 2 years from now, Luther Burden ended up developing into the best wide receiver on this team, we could see a plausible scenario that happens. Again, I had Rome Odunze with a slightly better prospect grade comparatively, 88.5 on Odunze versus an 86.5 on Burden. But I mean, Burden, the skill set, the ball in his hands, not to mention the compliment he has to Odunze's skill set working down the field. This could be one of the premier 1-2 tandems in the league.
Yeah, and if you were in a deep rebuild, like, and this is the nice thing, this is our top 24. This is our initial reaction, basically. The draft was yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, it just ended yesterday. If you guys want updated rankings and all that kind of stuff, these are going to change over the next couple of days, over the next couple of weeks, based on how ADP is shaking out, more information that we get. So make sure you're tuned in over on Flock because you'll get the most up-to-date rankings. But if you're in a deep rebuild, I would actually probably rather have Burden than RJ Harvey because he's a better prospect than RJ Harvey. And also, like I said, year 2, year 3, he has a higher value ceiling because he was highly thought of in the Dynasty community. Like you said, DJ Moore could be on his way out. I'm not going to do it yet because I do think in a vacuum, I'd probably prefer Harvey right now because of what he could represent his rookie season. Because of what Harvey can represent his rookie season in a vacuum, I do prefer Harvey, but it wouldn't shock me if we look back, 6 years from now and we're like, I cannot believe people took RJ Harvey over Luther Burden. Like, with everything we knew about Burden coming out of college, how did we possibly not take him over RJ Harvey? Like, would it shock you if that was the narrative of a couple of years from now?
Yeah, I'm just not willing to lower him any lower than the 201. Again, I do have him one spot ahead of Harvey because this is a guy that we were literally talking about on the same plane as Chase, Neighbors going into the draft or going into last.
You convinced me. I'm going to put Burden over Harvey too. Because I think he's generally just the better prospect, and I want to bet on the better prospect. So Jaden Higgins, the final guy this year. We'll try and speed this along because we do have a couple more players to get to. Jaden Higgins goes to the Houston Texans. Pretty simple here. He is a big receiver who had a good skill set, and he got top 35 draft capital to a team that has Tank Dell coming off of a major injury, who's undersized, who didn't really look that good last year anyways. I don't know. They must not think very highly of Tank Dell at this point in time for drafting him and Jalen Knoll in the 3rd round. And Christian Kirk is there, who they brought in from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nico Collins struggled to stay healthy. A big issue for the Texans last year was receivers staying healthy. All of them missed time. Diggs out for the season. Dell out for the season at the end. And then Collins missed a number of games with a hamstring injury. So they threw a lot of resources at this position, getting Kirk, getting Knoll, and getting Higgins most notably. Collins is going to take away a lot of coverage, man. And Higgins on the outside, opposite of Collins, to me gets me really excited because from a talent standpoint, I had Higgins and Burden a lot closer, or Higgins, Burden, and Golden, a lot closer than maybe a lot of other people did. He was my wide receiver 6 in the class, just behind Burden at 4 and Golden at 5.
Yeah, like for reference, I had Burden and Igbuka with the same grade, and then I had Golden kind of on his own, and I had going into the draft Higgins in a tier with more so like the Alex, who we'll talk about a little later, didn't quite get the draft capital we were hoping for, and who was the other one I had in there? I believe
Harris, Royals.
trying to remember. Or was it? It might have been Jack Besh. I think it was Jack Besh. But regardless, 35th overall draft capital, like you said. You have a clear alpha wide receiver on the other side that can take away a lot of the X responsibility, because that was the other thing too. Like Higgins, everybody said prototype X wide receiver. I also think, at least early on, having another guy in Nico who is already one of the best X wide receivers in the NFL to learn from. Eventually, I think the goal for the Texans is maybe using those guys interchangeably. Some maybe get some of those Z wide receiver alignments, especially in 12 personnel. You have two guys that are 6'4" on the field together. Regardless, I think the biggest winner of this situation, we'll talk about Noah in a second, is CJ Stroud.
Yeah, and I actually think that Higgins has versatility to play big slot too if they wanted to do that. Like if you have Collins, let's say it's a red zone play, Collins on the outside taking away, two people because they don't want to throw a back shoulder fade to a dominant red zone guy like Nico Collins, and Jaden Higgins works over the middle of the field, catches easy touchdowns as a result of that. That would make a lot of sense. I think he can play big slot. I think he can play outside. This gives him a lot more versatility. They have two slot receivers now with Kirk and with Noel, and then they have two outside wide receivers with Higgins and with Collins.
For sure. We love Higgins. Again, he is the last of this tier. Again, I wouldn't personally do it, but if somebody wanted to make the case, he's their 112, he's their 201, I would see them out, because this is about as ideal of a situation as he could have gotten into in the long term, being a clear-cut number 2 wide receiver for a quarterback we believe to develop into one of the best in the NFL. But we can move on. Like we said, 205 to 210 is where the projections get a little murkier. We have to do a little bit more thinking. But the thinking led both of us to the fact that 4th-round Bashal Tutin landing with the Jacksonville Jaguars, potentially being Liam Cohn's Bucky Irving, is too much to pass up at the 205.
Yeah, and again, we'll try and rattle through these ones quicker, but Tutin going 104, which in some drafts is a 3rd-round pick, by the way. Like in compensatory picks, depending on how many you get, sometimes you're a compensatory 3rd-round pick at 104. Same goes for Scadaboo at 105. James Conner was the 105th pick in the 2017 class, and he was a 3rd-round pick. So these guys are basically 3rd-round picks or late 3rd-round picks, early 4th-round picks. Not a huge difference hit rate-wise, even from the 85th pick to these type of guys. So Tutin, ETN final year of his rookie deal. Bigsby, good player. I think he's definitely going to probably be a factor in this backfield. Again, this coaching staff, this regime, this GM, Liam Cohn picked this guy when they had 2 capable running backs already. And ETN could be on his way out, could be traded. We don't know. There's still teams, Bears, Cowboys, that could trade for ETN if they want to. And Tutin was the guy that they picked. He is basically, for Liam Cohen's purposes, a faster, more explosive Bucky Irving. He legitimately was a much better athlete than Irving, is bigger than Irving, and can catch the ball just as good as Irving, make people miss just as good as Irving. So I love this fit for Bashal Tutin. I think people are going to overthink it a little bit because it's a crowded backfield. I really like it. I'm going to be taking him 205, 206 in a lot of my drafts.
98th percentile speed score, 97th percentile burst score. Talking about a guy that graded 15 out of 15 elusiveness for both of us, landing with one of the most creative minds in the league with Liam Cohn. Slam dunk. We saw the Bucky Irving success, like you said. Would not be at all shocked if by week 8 this year, Bashal Tutin is the starting running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars and averaging 15 PPR points per game.
I had a higher grade on him than Harvey, too. He was my RB6 in the class going into the draft. So this isn't me just elevating a guy from landing spot, but this is going to be a really improved offense with Lawrence, with Hunter, with BTJ, and Liam Cohn calling the shots. Sign me up. I want pieces of it. And Tutin seems like the running back piece that I want at this point in time. RIP to ETN and Tank Bigsby, but ETN could still get dealt, like I said. Cam Scadaboo, next player here. Giants have Tyrone Tracy, hit on their 5th-round pick of him last year, but Cam Scadaboo was a high 4th-round pick. Like I said, could have been a 3rd-round pick in other classes. To me, that screams that he's probably their preference, because why would you even, we were thinking going into day 3, are they even going to spend a pick at all on running back? Are they just going to roll with Tyrone Tracy? And they go with a guy who was my RB7 in the class going in to the NFL draft, and on the prospect model was actually the only running back 1 upside prospect to ever be drafted on day 3. So the model says that since 2016, no running back was as good as Cam Scadaboo, who went on day 3. Think of the Chase Browns of the world, some of the guys that have hit from day 3, Bucky Irvings of the world. Cam Scadaboo apparently is the best prospect according to the prospect model.
Yeah, and the biggest distractor and why he was, people might say, well, given his efficiency metrics, given his overall production, given how good he was in the college football playoffs, why wouldn't he be ranked as a top 4 or 5 running back? Our main problem with him was speed, and where the NFL would value that speed. And yeah, on surface level, 45th percentile speed score, 4.65 40-yard dash, not ideal. However, for a powerful running back that will contribute in short yardage situations, that will contribute in goal line situations, 89th percentile burst score. I do think, again, whether you prefer Tracy, whether you prefer Scadaboo, I think both are solid bets at their ADP at this point. They are both going to be, for me, between that running back 21, 22 to running back 28 range in Dynasty. If you want Scadaboo higher, I think that's fine. If you want Tracy higher, I think that's fine. You mentioned the Ingram and Kamara Timu earlier on. I think this is the Ingram and Kamara Timu because Mark Ingram was literally my comp for Cam Scadaboo. And in terms of receiving profile, space back like Tracy is, again, I'm not saying he's Alvin Kamara. Let's get that out of the way. I can see them being kind of used like a 60-40, 55-45 situation either way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To me, it's just buying into a prospect who is a lot better than his draft capital. And also, too, who knows what's going to happen next year? They could clean house in New York, new coach, new GM, whatever. And then whatever you did in the NFL is not important. It just matters who's the better player. And to me, I just think that Cam Scadaboo is a better player than Tyrone Tracy. As good as Tracy was his rookie season, I do think he probably would be better in a complementary role to be able to get in space, catch the football, use his speed, that kind of thing. Him running up the middle 20 times a game like he was doing last year, I don't necessarily think he's better than Cam Scadaboo in that area. I think Scadaboo can be better in that regard.
Yeah. I think at the very minimum, it is debatable because we did see him have success and be efficient at the next level doing that versus we haven't really seen it with Scadaboo. But at the same time, though, regardless, we also saw in critical situations, short yardage situations, goal line situations, them literally bringing in Devin Singletary because Tyrone Tracy did make a few mistakes. I'll tell you right now, if he makes a mistake early on in the season, Cam Scadaboo may have full autonomy in that goal line role.
You know what this kind of reminds me of a little bit? I've seen people point out that this is like Bucky Irving, Rachaad White. I don't think it's like that. No. What I think this is like is Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take.
Where Gibson, we thought he was going to be like an absolute stud for the first couple of years of his career. After year 2, I believe it was for Gibson, they brought in Brian Robinson, and then Brian Robinson kind of took over the backfield. And I could see that being the case for Cam Scadaboo because Tyrone Tracy does make mistakes like Gibson made mistakes, and Cam Scadaboo doesn't really make those mistakes. And I could see him winning the heart of the coaching staff as a result of that. We can group these receivers together just to speed this up. Kyle Williams goes 69th overall to the Patriots. Jack Bech goes in the mid-second round to the Las Vegas Raiders. Same goes for Trey Harris in the Chargers situation. I like Kyle Williams the most of this group because Kyle Williams goes to the situation with the most open targets, first of all. I mean, Stephon Diggs comes in there, but for the most part, Patriots have been searching for receivers for years, and Kyle Williams profiles as a really good separator. Drake May is going to love the downfield ability. He, of course, has a really big arm. We even saw Kayshon Boutte getting long targets and long touchdowns from Drake May last year. I like the fit for Kyle Williams the most out of this group, but I do really like the fit for Jack Bech, kind of getting to work with Jacoby Myers over the middle of the field. Brock Bowers obviously going to be your number one pass game weapon, and Ashton Jeanty going to be the engine of the offense for the most part. Those two guys specifically, I feel pretty good about getting mid to late second round if I'm looking for receiver help.
Yeah, and I have Harris right after those guys. It goes Bech 18, 19 Kyle Williams, 20 Trey Harris for me. I did have Bech the highest in my prospect grades. I do think he lands in a situation with the Raiders where he can, by the end of the year, really establish himself as that number 2 weapon in the offense. Jack Bech, a guy that is unafraid to go across the middle of the field. Jack Bech, a guy that we literally compared to Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, a.k.a. the Rams prototype. He is a no-nonsense wide receiver that immediately will impact your middle of the field offense. He will go after those hospital balls. He will get tough yards after the catch. He is a professional wide receiver, and I do think the Raiders were looking for just professional pass catchers to be able to pair for Brock Bowers long-term. I think Jacoby Myers, at least in the intermediate, will provide a little bit of a hurdle, but I do think long-term Bech will be the number 2 here in an offense that I do project to really have success. I mean, I think Geno Smith is an underrated quarterback landing in a much more ideal situation than he had even in Seattle, and Jack Bech has the opportunity to really develop here.
Yeah, and you might have the best young running back in the league and best young tight end in the league, or maybe the best tight end period in the league at this point already with Brock Bowers. So I think Bech can be Geno's JSN. Get him over the middle of the field, throw him the ball like crazy. Obviously, Myers probably a little bit going to be in the way of that early on in his career, but I do really like the fit for him. I had Kyle Williams, my wide receiver 8 going into the draft. I had Trey Harris, my wide receiver 9, and Jack Bech as my wide receiver 10. So all these guys are relatively in the same range. Trey Harris goes to the Chargers. The reason I actually prefer the other two guys is simply kind of a volume concern that I have with Trey Harris, because the Chargers are going to want to run the ball like crazy. They drafted a running back in the first round. They threw the ball only 495 times last year, and Trey Harris needs development. I like the fit for him long-term because Mike Williams getting to learn behind a guy like that actually makes a lot of sense, but I expect week 1, Mike Williams, QJ, Ladd McConkey to be out there. I don't expect Trey Harris to get on the field right away. And he is a little bit of a developmental receiver. So you have that worry that if he's not getting on the field right away, does he face plant? Does he not hold his value? That kind of stuff. Even though surface level, it's great. He could be the number 2 for Justin Herbert long-term. I think it's more complex than that, more in-depth than that. And again, number 2 for Justin Herbert long-term might mean number 2 in an offense where Ladd McConkey's commanding 150 targets a year and the offense in general is only throwing 475.
Yeah, and I think that would be the worry. Like you said, in terms of your prospect grades, I had it Besh at number 8, Kyle Williams at number 9, and Trey Harris at number 10. So fitting, of course, that they are all back-to-back, basically in the order that I had them ranked as prospects. Again, you mentioned the Kyle Williams fit. I think he's got the opportunity to potentially develop into the long-term number 1 for Drake May, a guy that obviously you guys know I believe in. And like you said with Trey Harris, reminded me a lot of Juju Smith-Schuster, power slot wide receiver, fits the identity kind of what they want you to do on offense. Big physical yak player. You get him in space, a little bit of play action, drag routes. You can see Trey Harris kind of using that yak ability. If he has a Devontae Smith, if he has a Juju Smith-Schuster level upside, we could be looking at maybe 120, 130 targets playing behind a number 1 wide receiver like Ladd.
Yeah, and the one thing I would like to point out, too, is that my tight end 4 in the class, Oronde Gadsden, was drafted to the Chargers in the 5th round, and I do think he's going to factor into this passing game because he's pro-ready as a pass catcher. Depending on how much he gets on the field, because he's not a very good blocker, he could factor into this passing game and take away targets from the receivers as well.
I think we're going to see a lot of varied usage between Gadsden as the big slot, obviously Trey Harris playing some slot. And of course, when you need more of a vertical slot role, you have Ladd McConkey maybe shifting inside. I think honestly, just adding versatility to that Chargers pass attack, you can see clearly was the goal for Jim Harbaugh this offseason.
Yeah, and QJ also has quite a bit of versatility to catch the ball and carry the ball as well, too. So Milroe's the last guy in this tier. I actually do have him a little bit higher than specifically Harris and Jack Besh. I think I actually have him higher than all of these receivers. I think he's right behind the running backs for me in this tier. And obviously, I've talked about Jalen Milroe ad nauseum before the draft, but basically, here's the cliff notes. Nobody runs like this at the quarterback position. Nobody. No. Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, these guys run like this. That's pretty much it. And Jalen Milroe needs time to develop, but I think this is a good landing spot for him, first of all. I think this is a good, solid, patient coaching staff with a quarterback ahead of him on the depth chart in Sam Darnold, who's effectively on a 1-year deal. Even though he signed a 3-year contract, all the guaranteed money's in the first year pretty much. And Jalen Milroe, let's say by the end of year 1, shows them a lot in practice, on scout team, whatever they got to show him. Maybe he gets in there for a couple of games. Sam Darnold also hasn't been the most durable guy in the world, so it's possible he gets in there for a couple of games his rookie season and we get to see what he can do. I think Jalen Milroe, there's let's say a 5 to 10% chance that Jalen Milroe is the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks 1 calendar year from now. There's enough of a chance to me. 3rd round capital is significant enough. He was a raw guy. He needs some development time, but he's going to get that development time. If you think about former 3rd round picks getting opportunities to start, Desmond Ridder got a full season to start for the Falcons. Malik Willis had time to start. Sam Howell's a 5th round pick and had a full season to start with the Commanders a couple of years back. I do think that Jalen Milroe is going to get a chance at some point to start for this team, whether it's for injury purposes or whether it's just, year 2, year 3, maybe we cut Sam Darnold. He's not really playing at the level we want him to, and we're going to throw Milroe in there. He's got JSN to throw to. Offensive line's a little bit of a work in progress right now, but by the time Milroe gets in there, hopefully things are a little bit better.
Yep. Nephew of Sean Alexander, I believe they mentioned at the draft, right?
Yeah.
I think this is the range for him. Again, obviously it depends on what you need. If you're more of a win now type of team, you need more of a flex appeal player to suit in potentially to your starting lineup, or at the very minimum as the depth player in year 1. I think you go with the wide receivers, Scattaboo, and we'll talk about Sampson in a second, but I also think that would be a reasonable take. With Milroe, like you said, though, the range of outcomes is very large. It's a maybe Malik Willis situation, or it's a Jalen Hurts situation. If it's Jalen Hurts, guess what? We mentioned implied value for Cam Ward. He has a ton of implied value.
He'll smoke Cam Ward in implied value.
Yeah, in terms of now, obviously, once you bake in 1st overall versus 92nd overall, that does matter. But the implied value of Milroe, if he does get started an opportunity, is extremely high. The only issue is he's not guaranteed that starting opportunity. And if he does get that starting opportunity and he does show maybe some negative signs, like for example, if Cam Ward struggled out of the gate, people would say 1st overall, he's learning. If Milroe struggled out of the gate, they would say, well, it's a late day 2 quarterback. They're probably just going to draft one the next year. I think the value in terms of market retention matters here to the point where, again, if you're a rebuilding team and you can go through the peaks and valleys maybe of a Milroe value situation, you can take him as high as 17. I have him at 23 right now, simply because if you're in the mid-second and maybe you're a playoff team last year, you maybe want somebody with more utility right away.
Yeah, exactly. If you're okay with the peaks and valleys, Milroe's the type of guy for you, because there is the range of outcomes in which he turns into Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts, you got to remember, because he was a second-round pick and Milroe being a third-round pick, people are not going to buy into them right away. They got to go out there and they got to prove it. They got to run the ball really well, obviously, which we know Milroe can do, score us fantasy points. If he does, by, let's say, we fast forward 2.5 years from now, and we're like, Jalen Milroe's the starter for the Seahawks, and he's a top 5 startup pick, that was going to be worth taking over Trey Harris in rookie drafts. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm willing to take the shot on him.
Yeah, for sure. But we can move on. Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, at this type of opportunity cost, mid to late second, it's baked in. Guess what? If you're a competing team and you miss on a mid to late second, you're probably not a competing team if that actually impacts your ability to compete.
Absolutely. So moving on to the final 2 guys of this tier, we have a couple other guys in the tier with these players, but in the interest of making this a top 24 tier list, of course, all of our rankings will be updated all the time over on Flock Fantasy. Dylan Sampson, who we already made reference to, Cleveland Browns took him at 126th overall in the draft, mid 4th round pick. And then Mason Taylor, who was a top 42 pick, of the New York Jets, at the tight end position. Dylan Sampson, you're a little bit higher on, so I'll let you talk about him, and then maybe I'll go through Mason Taylor and we can wrap this up.
So we've mentioned the Ingram Kamara. We've mentioned the David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, I'm not comparing the situation apples to apples, because I do think you have to give credence to the fact that Judkins went 36th overall and Sampson went in the 4th round at 126. However, they were literally back-to-back in my rankings. I had my RB5 in the class was Quinshon Judkins. My RB6 in the class was Dylan Sampson. Obviously, I can't rank them back-to-back because of that discrepancy in draft capital. I don't think Dylan Sampson automatically got worse in football. And Dylan Sampson is a 20.6-year-old running back with an elite receiving ceiling. I think the way this ends up materializing is similar to what we saw at Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins may begin the monopolized goal line opportunity, being that between the tackles ball carrier. And we see Dylan Sampson maybe supplemented 8 to 10 carries, 5 to 6 targets a game. Again, obviously that's a little rosy. It's still only a 4th round investment. You got a 2nd round running back in the backfield. There is very possibly the opportunity that Quinshon Judkins takes on a 3-down capability on this team. It's just, given my own analysis of both these running backs, I think the best interest of the Cleveland Browns would be having Quinshon Judkins as your hammer, having Dylan Sampson as your space back. And even if he's just getting a 35-40% opportunity share, if the majority of that's coming in the receiving game, I think that is worth getting at the 2-3 turn. On top of that, you also have the implied value. If Judkins were to miss any time, I think Sampson would be an absolute smash in those weeks.
Yeah, I said Hunt Chubb. Like, this could be the new Hunt Chubb. Like, they had a situation a couple years back where Baker Mayfield played at his best when Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb were playing. Yeah, Zeke Pollard. Yeah, Zeke Pollard, I think, is actually even better comparison because Pollard obviously was one of the best handcuffs in fantasy, always had great implied value and had some standalone roles as well. I think Zeke Pollard is the one that I'll stick with going forward. But my only hesitancy on Dylan Sampson is I've been kind of burned by young backs who need a little bit of development, like Trey Benson and Jalen Wright and guys like that. So that would be my one concern. Is that Judkins, he's ready to go, man. You give him 20 carries on an NFL Sunday right now, he'd be fine.
Yeah, and I think I've heard this before, but if you need a running back to rush 23 times for $120 in a 20-17 win, I forget who I saw that. I think it might have been actually Nick that said that. So shout out if it was. Because I was listening to that. I'm like, Judkins is that guy. You need to bleed out the clock. You're in the 4th quarter. You're up 3. You need to convert a crucial 3rd and 2. Judkins going to be the guy you give the ball to. Once you're in a situation where you're down by 7 late in the game and you need your space back to be able to catch a Texas route and take it to the house, Dylan Sampson's your guy. So I think both are going to have utility. Again, I would prefer Judkins, obviously, given the draft capital difference, given the fact I actually did have him as a higher prospect grade. But for people that are just completely writing off Dylan Sampson, I would say be hesitant on that.
Yeah, for sure. If Kevin Stefanski can use them correctly, 17, 18 touches on the ground for Judkins, a couple targets here and there. Dylan Sampson, give him 5 to 8 carries a game and a couple targets here and there. Like, that's probably what you want to do with these guys. Mason Taylor of the New York Jets was the 3rd tight end off the board after the first 2 go in the 1st round. The Jets have nothing at tight end right now. Like, Jeremy Ruckert was their slated starter going into this. So Mason Taylor, as a 21-year-old dude, is probably going to have to start right away on an offense that has absolutely no good receivers on it other than Garrett Wilson. And they tried to address the receiver position laughably with Arian Smith in the 4th round. So there's a good chance they're going to stay not adding to this position. And Mason Taylor has an opportunity, realistically, to become the number 2 target in this offense. Now, it's Justin Fields-led offense. They're probably going to be pretty run-heavy. But I do think Mason Taylor has pretty, like, if you think about it realistically, what's stopping Mason Taylor from being, an excellent redraft best ball pick this year in underdog drafts? Like, he has the realistic range of outcomes to be the number 2 for his team.
100%. And it's funny because did you end up hearing the draft call between him and Tanner Engstrand?
No, I did not.
So when they called him, Tanner Engstrand, if you guys are unfamiliar, the new Jets offense coordinator, worked under Ben Johnson, obviously with the Detroit Lions last year, coming over with the Aaron Glenn staff. And he looked so excited, saying, we have a plan for you. We have a vision for you. We know exactly what your fit's going to be in this offense, and we are fired up to have you in. And who did he just work with in his last spot? 6'3", 245-pound Sam Laporta. Who's he getting now? 21-year-old, 6'5", 251-pound Mason Taylor. I'm not saying Mason Taylor will have a Sam Laporta level rookie season, a Sam Laporta level second season, but if the offense coordinator is that fired up to get a 4.65, 9.27 RAS tight end at the beginning of the 2nd round, reading the tea leaves here, I think he's going to be involved right away.
Yeah, and I actually do really like the landing spot for Terrence Ferguson going to the Rams as well. He's playing behind Adams and Puka Nacua, so he doesn't have as immediate, year 2 or year 1 number 2 receiver appeal like what Mason Taylor has. Plus, Mason Taylor a little bit better of a prospect. I also have Elikai Manor, who went in the 4th round to the Titans, just outside this range.
Yep.
You talked about Jalen Noel for the Texans in the 3rd round, just outside this range. DJ Giddens getting a half decent landing spot.
Jaden Blue, Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, there's guys that we could have talked about here. You guys want to talk about the draft capital of like a Tyler Shuck potentially needing to be respected here. Shadur Sanders, if you still believe in him, potentially getting a starting opportunity for the Browns. There's guys that we could have talked about. Obviously, all of our rankings are on the site. They'll be continuously updated if you want to keep on top of those.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll point out too is we named 10 or so names there, which goes to show you that any pick in the 3rd round, there's not really much separation this year.
No, I would say once you get outside the top 20 to 22 picks, like the Trey Harrises and the Jalen Milrose and stuff of the world, they're going to start to blend together. So if you have, let's say your rookie picks were 101, 211, 212, 301, 302, 303, maybe you want to trade back from some of those picks or trade up with some of those picks and try and get some better, more tier break caliber picks, because I don't think there's going to be a huge difference this year between the 212 and the 309.
Yep, I agree with you there.
For sure. So, like I said, if you want all of our bonus content, we talked about film breakdowns. We talked about the draft guide getting updated, our actual tier list rankings, Superflex, 1 quarterback, rookie rankings, top 50s for 1 quarterback and Superflex rookie drafts. Everything is over on flockfantasy.com. Annual subs right now. Promo code FSE. Get an annual sub, annual Mother Flocker tier. You get a free team review. We can help you with your rookie draft, personalized advice. We'll do it on Dynasty Decisions. We'll do it privately if you want it done that way. It doesn't really matter. And you also get free buy, sell, hold report voucher for that too. So if you guys want to sign up for annuals, now's the best time. Because if you think about it, sign up for an annual subscription right now. You're covered through the Dynasty rookie draft season this year, through the redraft season this year, and then also probably through most of the Dynasty rookie draft season next year. So really, really good value there. Definitely check that out. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. Check out everything else we got going on the site as well. The prospect models, running back model, completely up to date on the site. Wide receiver model, going up to date live today on the site as well. Tight end model should be live probably on Monday on the site as well. So if you guys want to check out all that stuff, that is all linked down below on Flock Fantasy. Use code FSE, of course. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.